Hey everybody, this is Rustin Rose with AXS Entertainment and of course Metalholic Magazine. Joining us today, the legend himself, Mr. Paul Bostaph of Slayer. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Well, it's great to get a chance to talk with you. It has been eons, way eons, forbidden era eons, and there's so much to talk about. So let's sort of jump right to it. You guys kicking off the Repentless tour here next week. Are you guys digging out anything obscure for the tour, or can we just look forward to a set list weighted with the classics and a heavy dose of Repentless?
I'm not sure if you'll see anything that's totally obscure per se, but we have so many songs that at our disposal right now in terms of just what we can play as a band that you never know what we're going to come up with. We're dusting off a few songs I think this week. Carrie and I are getting together, and you might hear a few things you haven't heard for a while. So
nice. That'll give us all something to look forward to. It's always exciting. You always want to hear the hits, but you always want to hear some of that stuff that you never really get to hear. So,
well, I always say it's a great problem to have, but what song do you take out of the set list to put something obscure in? You take one song out and people are ticked off to even play that song that night. And what I mean by it's a great problem to have is this band has so many great songs, from a fan's perspective, which I've had that perspective that, over the course of time, it's like you can, you take Seasons from the Abyss out and that'll be the song you wanted to hear that night because you put it in something else, so it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, there's not much you're going to do to let the fans down either, because you can't go wrong pretty much with anything you choose, right? So
I hope so, yeah.
Now, it's weird. Slayer always seemed to me to be the most underground of the big four bands. Does it seem surreal that this sort of cult status that Slayer's always had has now sort of elevated the band to headlining Mayhem in these huge stages across the globe?
Does it seem weird?
Surreal, or just because
surreal.
Back in '94 or '92 when you joined the band, they were still sort of that underground thing, and as the other three of the big four have sort of done their thing, Slayer has slowly risen out of that underground status while still hanging on to that underground cred, if you will.
I don't know if it seems surreal to me. I think the one thing I think we remain focused on is ourselves. In other words, in terms of our sound, we're fans of metal as well. So I think, in a way, in an odd way, we look at ourselves, and we don't want to let ourselves down. So I think that'll kind of maybe what gives us that underground kind of feel to the band. But I don't know if it's surreal. In general, I think it's pretty surreal to be playing drums. Still, being able to tour and doing that kind of stuff. Looking at it like if I was a 15-year-old kid when I first started playing the drums, I wanted to do this, but it's been a long time and I'm still doing it. So from that aspect, it's surreal.
Well, in the last album you recorded with Slayer, 2001's God Hates Us All, so much has changed since then. We lost Jeff. Technology has changed the dynamics of creating a record. Tell us about your experience making Repentless, going back in the studio this time with the guys.
Yeah, it was really strange. Part of it is that it was kind of business as usual in a way, which I know I said earlier it wasn't business as usual in a previous interview, but it was. I guess the strangest part about it would probably be it wasn't technology or anything. The things that were familiar was the fact that I've done it with this band before.
Right.
I know the drill per se, but the other side of it was, in my absence from the band, I'd recorded albums with Testament and Exodus, and and been a bunch of different places, jammed with a bunch of different people, and I was able to draw from all those experiences on this record, which I didn't have in any previous record I've done with the band before. And those experiences, I think, have made me a better drummer than I have been in the past, in my opinion. But also, obviously the obvious thing is we didn't have Jeff with us, so typically, when I'd be in the studio in the past, I'd always I knew how to read what was making the guys excited about my drum tracks. And, since Jeff wasn't with us, at times I'd have to, I was thinking of Jeff more than I probably ever would have, If he was in the room, I probably wouldn't have thought about him at all until he said something, But, you know what I mean? But,
right.
Now, but he was always in the back of my mind when, part of it was I wanted to do honor to the album, to honor Jeff. And then, part of it was, well, what would Jeff think about this, and just kind of, he was still in the room. So that's probably what was the strangest part about it.
Right. And, when 20 plus years ago, when you initially joined Slayer, you did Divine Intervention, you had something to prove back then. I know you've said that before. After all these years coming back, it's a different mood, a different tempo and everything. But did you feel like you still had something to prove on Repentless?
I don't know. I don't think I had something to prove on this album. I didn't feel like I did. I just felt like this was an important record. And I felt like, again, to do, since we lost Jeff, to honor Jeff. And, I don't necessarily have anything to prove. I think, personally, I don't have to prove anything to anybody but myself. And I think that whole attitude about having something to prove, that's when I was younger, and I did. And don't get me wrong, I'm not resting on my laurels. I think now I approach it differently. Instead of having something to prove, I think I want to have fun playing drums, And I think that's the difference. I want that to define my playing now. Because for me, I started out playing drums. It was fun. I was excited about it. And, along the way, you got something to prove. It's this journey of emotion and, and what we as people sometimes do. I think ultimately, the guys that I really enjoy playing look like they're having a blast while they're doing it. And it looks fun, And throughout all the time I've been playing and, my journey in being other bands and being with this band and then coming back to this band, I think ultimately the one thing I want out of playing the drums is to have fun, So, my opinion's always been if you're not having fun doing something, don't do it.
Absolutely, Did you try anything, because you've been doing this obviously for years, been on so many great albums, did you try anything new on this album in the studio that maybe you hadn't previously done before?
Well, I tried a different snare drum, but other than that, I don't know if I tried anything different. I think one of the things that I always knew, but I don't know if but now I think it's becoming more well ingrained into my style, is to play more for the song and less for myself, Mm-hmm. I think when I was younger, having something to prove, you're always trying to do something different than somebody else, and I put a lot of time into thinking about what I wanted to do on the drums and going down and working it out and coming up with these different ideas. Now I think I trust myself to know that that way of thinking and that approach to the drums has always been there from the beginning. So I think I learned to let go a little more and just kind of let things happen. And sometimes I think that creates some of the most exciting moments.
I would definitely agree. Slayer plays with a lot of aggression and brutality, but you've always struck me as a pretty low-key, laid-back guy. What sort of pisses you off or makes you angry, besides stupid questions like this?
Well, that's not a stupid question, actually, but God, what makes me angry? Stupid people. That really pisses me off. Bad driving pisses me off. Ignorance pisses me off. Things like that. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot of things will, So but music keeps me kind of mellow. I'm able to get my aggressions out, and I just kind of don't let my emotions control me. I get it out on the drum set.
So now as we mentioned before, you've recorded records with so many great bands, 4 of thrash's most important bands in my mind, and your name is right there with all the big names in thrash, drumming period, Lombardo, obviously, McLean, Hoagland. You've been doing this for 35 years now. How do you put all of that into perspective? As you said, you're still here doing it for one of the biggest bands in the world.
Don't forget Tom Hunting.
Yeah, can't forget Tom either. There's so many names you'd leave out, unfortunately. Nick Menza, Igor.
Lars Ulrich, you can't forget Lars.
Yeah, but so many great names you're in there with. How do you put that all in perspective?
Yeah, I guess I was just lucky enough to be in a good band to begin with. Forbidden was a really good band, and that was my first band, and I think that's where it all started. I think putting it in perspective, I think we had the right idea to begin with, and I think, like I said, I was fortunate enough to be playing with guitar players that knew what the hell they were doing, that strived to be original, and we all did in that band, and it was hard. It was perspective-wise, if I'm looking at it, putting it in terms of being in with all those names of great drummers, I think it's an honor to be even considered after all these years, something like that. But perspective-wise, I'm still approaching it the same way. It's like, it's not, for me, it's not as much of what people think as much as keeping it kind of in the moment, and it's about the next performance, the next rehearsal. It's about next time I sit down, how am I going to better my playing? Because there's so many ways my playing could be better, and that's kind of what it is. I think it's always the same thing. It's trying to not being content with knowing that somebody put you in a sentence with all those great musicians. And maybe all these guys would think the same way. It's got nothing to do with sitting back and going, hey, somebody put me in a legendary status. For me, it's kind of like, when I'm dead, people can then there's time for all that, I guess. But I'm still here, and I'm it's still, there's still music to play. So I guess for me it's still kind of I think that all of those artists have been doing it this long.
Mm-hmm.
And doing it well. So I guess to be considered one of the guys that be put on the same level with people that I admire, and I admire all those drummers, that's an honor.
Absolutely, and you were one of the front runners of the genre too. So you paved the way for so many new drummers that have come out. So I always wondered, of all your incredible recorded works, is there a particular piece that you're most singularly proud of?
A particular piece or particular song, or
your choice. Particular song, a particular album, just the one thing that you're most proud of that stands out above all else.
Man, it's a hard one. It is, because there's so many songs that I could look at, and I'm trying to dig deep and think about it in different ways in terms of not only something that everybody would be familiar with, but something that I'm particularly happy with. And I think probably as a whole, I probably would say, just if I had to name anything, it just brought up there's a second record I did with Forbidden. The album's called Twisted in the Form.
Right.
And there's a song on that record called Twisted in the Form. I think it's one of the last songs on the record, or I don't even remember where it falls in that record. But I was listening to, prior to recording that record and working on it, we were on tour in Europe supporting our first record. And I think at night when I got through, I was one of the guys that loaded all the gear into the bay of the bus. We had two bands on one bus, so I was the guy that could do the Tetris in the bottom of the bus. We had 19 people on one bus. So whenever we were done playing, the headlining band, Sacred Reich, would go on stage, so everybody would be off the bus, and I get the bus to myself. So at that, I just started listening to Led Zeppelin Physical Graffiti at the time. And so every night, everybody would be off the bus, and you never got that opportunity just to be by yourself. So I just crack a beer, sit down, relax, decompress from the show, and listen to that album. And I just got drawn into that album. And I never really listened to it. I heard some of the hits, but never really heard the whole album. And I got lost in that feeling and listening to John Bonham, who I'd listened to other records, but on that record in particular, I just kind of got lost in it. So that song, Twisted in the Form, for me, even though it doesn't even hold a candle to anything Bonham would do, kind of is a reflection of that. So it stands out for me in that likeness.
Nice. All right, so before we get to our last question, I have sort of a left field one here that you may not relate at all, but there is an Iranian thrash metal band called Confess. I didn't figure that you'd probably ever heard of them, but I didn't know if you'd caught the news. It's been buzzing around this week. They were actually just thrown in prison by the Iranian government because they create thrash music, and now they're being tortured and probably going to be executed for their love of making this music. And I just figured, since it's been buzzing around the social media the last few days, I'd ask if you'd even heard about it or any thoughts you might have on it.
I haven't heard about it. I do know that in some Middle Eastern countries, I don't know about even if it's all Middle Eastern countries, but I do know that kind of, like, I think Western music, per se, I don't know if I'm getting it exactly right, so forgive me if I don't have my facts straight, but I know that it can be punishable by law to be playing that, so it's forbidden, I guess. So yeah, my perspective on that is, I guess they have their own culture over there, but I don't think you should lose your life or go to jail for for art. I don't believe that. I think you should have the freedom to do that. But that's, I'm an American, so I'm looking at it from that standpoint. I think those kids should be let go and should just send them to America. Do something, but I don't think you should lose your life for something like that.
All right. So last question before we get out of here, just for fun. If you could go back and re-record any Slayer album that you did not play on to make it your own, which would it be?
I wouldn't want to do that with any of them.
Just leave the magic alone, right?
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't want to make any of those albums my own because I love those albums. You know what I mean?
Right.
It wouldn't be the same record if I made it my own. You know what I mean? It'd be a different record. It'd still have the same music with a different drummer, but I don't think it would make it better. I think those moments are magic in and of themselves, and I wouldn't change a thing.
That is a fantastic answer. Paul Bostaph, Slayer, heading out next week on the Repentless tour. Testament and Carcass, what a fantastic lineup. Thank you so much for taking a little bit of time to talk with us, and we look forward to seeing you out there on the road.
You're welcome.